So at this time, I'd like to thank our Police Credit Union for sponsoring this LEAD series. For over 65 years, the Police Credit Union has been providing financial solutions to take care of our own, exclusively serving law enforcement professionals and their family members throughout California. They proudly provide banking solutions, including checking accounts, home and auto loans, credit cards, online services, and much more. As your financial partner, Police Credit Union is committed to helping you succeed financially, whatever your stage of life. So we thank Police Credit Union for being our exclusive one-source premier financial partner and for sponsoring our LEAD series. All right, my name is Sean Rundle. I'm the Deputy Director here at CPOA's office in Sacramento. This CPOA LEAD series was created immediately upon the onset of this pandemic so that the profession could stay connected and share best practices on a range of topics, maintaining personnel motivation, response to all of the issues of late, civil unrest, day-to-day operations, and so today's topic certainly plays into that. This session, again, is truly meant to be a roundtable, so we look forward to hearing your ideas, solutions, and questions during this forum from our speakers. So the conversation this afternoon is drones and first responders, and we're grateful that Skyfire Consulting has taken time to share with us today and provide some takeaways for your department. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ben Kroll with Skyfire to get us going, and again, look for the survey and poll questions to be coming up, and feel free to engage via the chat box, and we'll facilitate that engagement. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Kroll, and I am the COO and co-founder of Skyfire Consulting. So we're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have an office in Denver, and I'm actually in the Denver office right now. And this is essentially what we do. We go around, we do training and consulting for FAA and agencies building drone programs, and help with policy and development and all that kind of stuff. So my background, just real quick, is as I'm a commercial pilot and flight instructor. I've got about 5,000 hours in a variety of aircraft. And I've developed a lot of the training that we do at Skyfire and some of the policy and implementation that we do. I kind of run some of that stuff. So I am joined today by my good friend, Fritz. And if you guys don't know Fritz Rieber, Fritz is retired from Chula, Vista, and I'll let him kind of introduce himself here in a minute. But I'm always super excited whenever I get to talk to Fritz, because Fritz was kind of at the forefront of developing some of the really cool, the ability to do some of the stuff that we can do in law enforcement with drones today, and kind of being out front with some of that. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But I'll just kind of give Fritz here a minute just to kind of introduce himself and talk about his background.
All right, thanks, Ben. It's always a pleasure to join you and talk about drone as first responder, and appreciate it, Sean, for the invite. Right now, I'm head of public safety integration at Skydio. Certainly very interesting job now that we released the X2, so I'm super excited to talk to agencies every day about that, and it's obviously more designed for public safety. So I do get a chance to talk a lot about drones. I retired from Chula Vista a couple of years ago, back in 2018. Before I left, developed the drone as first responder program for them in partnership with Capt and Cape Termez, and of course Ben, you and I and he worked on the beyond visual line of sight waiver that Chula Vista is now enjoying, and then obviously some news about a new waiver that they've obtained that we can talk about later. So yeah, just enjoying the retirement. I busier than I thought I might be, but the drone world is super interesting, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're glad to have you. Thanks again to CPOA for having us and to be here to talk about this. One of the things, Fritz and I were talking about the other day was that even when you have 30 minutes, 60 minutes, there's so much stuff that you can talk about. There's a lot in here. So one of the things that we wanted to do real quick was just kind of get an idea of kind of where people are at. If people have programs, if people are just kind of, putting their toe in the water, figuring out kind of what they need to do next. So Sean, if you wouldn't mind putting up maybe that first survey question, everyone wouldn't mind just kind of weighing in on this first. We've got 4 questions here that I want to run through real quick.
And it looks like we can launch all those questions together, so we'll give everyone ample time.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
That'll hopefully help you. You could see kind of everything at once. So hopefully this
Perfect.
You should see the questions up there. And again, be sure to scroll down to the bottom, and we'll give everyone a few minutes to respond to these.
And just so everyone knows, this is actually this isn't just something that we store and are like, oh, that's interesting. This is actually really helpful for us to be able to respond to your needs and some of the problems that you're having out there. That's kind of we're really in a research and development phase still in this industry. There's a lot of people that say that there are experts out there. I'm not convinced that we really have any real experts yet. I mean, we have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge and experience, but we're still figuring this thing out. And so that's kind of where we need your guys' help. And that's where these questions come in. And we want to know kind of where you guys are having trouble and where, where some of the pain points are.
So we're almost to 50% responding, so we'll give it another maybe 20 seconds or so.
Okay, cool.
All right, so here are the results from.
Cool, awesome. And is this, Sean, is this sharing with everyone?
Yes, it is.
The poll results, okay, cool. Okay, so it looks like almost half of you, wow, yeah, so, okay, cool. So it looks like it's interesting seeing these numbers change. It looks like, I think over half have some type, well over half have some type of drone program established, okay. That's good to know. Looks like, wow, 57% of those programs are operating under both CO and 107. That's good to know. Number 3, how would you describe its effectiveness? That's interesting. You know, we have 30% that's not effective at all. And that's the stuff that we want to know about. Like, we want to try and figure out, like, why is that not effective? So if anyone, maybe offline, I'm going to share my contact info here in a little bit. And if anyone offline can fill me in on that, why your drone program is not effective, that's actually super helpful information for me, so that we can try and create a solution there. And then what's been the most challenging obstacle? Boy, yeah, that says it all. 71% say difficulty in understanding compliance with regulations. So super interesting stuff. Thanks, Sean, for that. And thanks everybody for, I mean, it's just super helpful data there. So what we're gonna talk about today is I'm going to do kind of a quick intro into kind of what it takes to build a program. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but just kind of some quick and dirty stuff on that. We'll talk about regulations a little bit too, because I know that even those of you who have a COA and are operating under Part 107, all that stuff, still run into questions with that too. So, and then once we're gone, we like to share. Once this webinar is over, I'm an open book. Feel free to call me, email me, text me. I'd like to be able to provide you guys with the information and the correct information. So we're just going to jump right into this real quick here. And like I said, I'm going to start with kind of the 4 components to what I would call building a successful UAS program. And let me just try and share my screen here real quick. Getting better at this Zoom thing. Here we go. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to run through all these slides here. This is just kind of some reference for everyone. Let's see. Looks like I'm not sharing. Sean, am I sharing there? Let's see. Okay, thanks. Let me move this stuff over here. Is that, let's see.
Also have $200,000.
All right, hey Sean, is that still sharing there?
Yes, I see it.
Oh, that's weird. It's telling me right now it's not sharing. So sorry about that, guys. Some technical difficulties here. But really the 4 key components that we want to talk about. So that's your equipment, right? That's the kind of drones or the unmanned aerial systems that you're going to get. A lot of options out there. Everybody's heard of DJI. I'm sure they're kind of the big name out there. But we've got some more innovation happening, and especially some more innovation happening within the US and with what Fritz is doing over at Skydio and some of the technology they've developed. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you get into that. There's some pretty neat stuff happening there. The second one's Faa Regulations and Certification. Obviously, like we were looking at, that's a tough one for most folks. And training is another one. How do you get trained up, and where do you go for training, and can you do that internally? Can you create your own training program? Those kinds of things.
Hey, Ben.
And then obviously, yeah.
Your screen is not sharing, and I went through this the other day. When you change screens, you have to reshare it, I think is what you have to do.
So I tried that, and what's happening is when I'm hitting play on my keynote here, it's for some reason it's stopping the share. I'm not sure why. So I just won't hit play.
If you click on the stop, it turns yellow up at the top of the screen, correct?
Correct, yeah.
If you click on that, I think it gives you an option to reshare. So click the play and then go up to that yellow bar and click on it. Does it do anything?
Let me find my cursor here. Yeah, it just doesn't get rid of that yellow bar. I think this may be some type of technical issue here.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm trying that, and it turns yellow. It says sharing is paused, resume share, and I click that, and it just doesn't do anything. So.
Okay.
But you guys you can see this screen, right?
Everything went away now.
Okay. Let's try this again. How about that one? Can you see that one?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one.
Okay, cool. Awesome, thank you. And so we talked a little bit about equipment. Let's talk about regulations just for a moment. And I know I saw a handful of folks are operating under Part 107, some are operating under COA, a lot are operating under both. If you don't know those terms that I just threw out there, I'll give you just kind of a quick walkthrough. And then I always put this on here to say, don't be afraid. The FAA is here to help and wants your program to be successful. And that's true. That's been my experience. The FAA sometimes gets a bad rap for some of the stuff that they do, and some stuff rightfully so. But with this and with them trying to integrate this into public safety, we have found that they want these programs to be successful. And sometimes it's hard to find the right information, even going from one FAA person to the other. So if you run into that, please call me. We've done a lot of work to make sure that we're giving out the right information there. So we talk about 2 different ways really that you can operate drones for an agency. You cannot operate your drone for your agency as a hobbyist. It's not something you can do. You can only do that. That would be somebody going to Best Buy and buying a drone and putting it up and flying it around for their own enjoyment. If you want to fly for your agency or operate commercially, you either need to have a Part 107 certificate. So that's an FAA certificate. So once you get this certificate, you're actually a certificated pilot according to the FAA under Part 107. So, and that's considered civil aircraft operations. And so you can actually use that. It's much like if you were driving a police car for your agency or police vehicle, you use your driver's license that you got from the DMV as your certificate to operate that vehicle. Same thing with this. You're using your 107 certificate to operate for the agency. So the other way you can fly is as a public aircraft operator. So that's a government agency. You have to be able to prove to the FAA that you're a government agency. And those are statutes that actually came from Congress many years ago. And they kind of said, what Congress said was, if you want to fly as a public aircraft operator, you can, your mission has to meet a what they call a governmental function. And so a government function is an activity undertaken by a government for these 7 things: national defense, intelligence gathering, firefighting, search and rescue, law enforcement, aeronautical research, biological, geological resource management. What this means in a practical sense is that if you're an agency and you're operating under a COA, which means you're operating under public aircraft operations, you can only do these things for your missions. If you wanted to get video of, say, a parade in your community and then post that on Facebook, technically you cannot do that with a COA. Technically, you have to have a 107 operator who is doing that mission. So some nuance and detail there. I always like to kind of remind people of that, even those who have kind of programs who've been stood up for a few years. That's an easy one to forget, and can get you afoul of some FAA rules there. So I always like to remind folks of that. So those are the two ways you can operate legally as an agency. Training is pretty straightforward. A lot of training providers out there, and you know, a lot of good ones, a lot of not so good ones. If anyone needs recommendations on training providers, happy to provide that. I'm sure Fritz can too. And then we talk about policy and challenges and implementing and all that. Really what we're talking about is like opposition that you might run into and things that you want to think about beforehand, like community engagement. And that's one I think Fritz can talk about here in just a minute. But all the things that kind of come along with this, like you have to build a policy for it, right? You have to build operations for it and best practices and those kinds of things. So that's sort of the fourth component in there. So that's kind of what it takes, really. Obviously, within that stuff, there's a lot, especially within the regulations. I did kind of just a quick cursory discussion of that. So I'm just going to kind of pause there for a second and see, does anyone have any questions on any of that stuff that I covered so far? Or Sean, has anyone commented on any question or put up any questions?
Not yet, but again, feel free to use the chat box or unmute yourself and speak up if you have a question or a comment.
Cool. All right. Well, if we don't, then, so I just told you from my perspective, you know, kind of what it takes, what I've seen successful agencies do to build programs. Like I said, we're fortunate enough to have Fritz Rieber here, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to him and ask him to talk about what that process was like, actually kind of taking all that stuff, starting from scratch, and kind of where that came from, and what they did down at Chula Vista. So Fritz, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, to be honest, the person who started the team was Captain Bernsley, and he's running the team now since I've left. And he did a crawl, walk, run strategy, which the FAA recommends, and that's build trust within the community before you buy your first drone. And a lot of times people buy a drone and then form the team around it. That's a natural progression, but I think it makes more sense to sort of build a team and then decide what kind of operations you want to do and then determine what kind of hardware you want. Coincidentally, Drone Responders released a few days ago something developed in coordination with Skydio and Brendan Groves, the head of policy and regulation, called the 5 C's, which are sort of the building blocks of building a drone program that's built on a foundation of trust. The 5 C's being community engagement, civil liberties and privacy, common operating procedures, clear oversight, and then cybersecurity. Those didn't exist when Vern started the team. He just some nuts and bolts of what he did. He formed a committee, got a bunch of stakeholders inside the police department, inside the fire department in the city. They got together, got a draft of a policy. They invited the ACLU to provide input. Got community leaders that might not have agreed to see what their concerns were, tried to address all those in a policy. Then they put the policy up for public comment. They set up an email and asked for everybody to anybody in the community to email questions or concerns. The fact that there is a lack of concern was also a great tool to bring to the city leaders, that there wasn't a big opposition within the community and there was some excitement actually. So it sort of was a process that everyone could weigh in on and was full transparency. And so that's what got the foundation going. I took over the team after that, and then had the opportunity to do the drone as first responder concept of operations through the IPP, which was really an advanced use of drones that no one had been doing at all. And just the idea that we were going to be sending out drones out over the community to radio calls all day, every day, was not met with the opposition we thought because of that groundwork. And some of the strategies that we learned from, we made sure we continued with the drone as first responder. If you go to the Chula Vista Police Department website, it's very well articulated what drone as first responder is. It shares the policy. It shares some video of best case scenarios. They have flight data that's posted up there real time each and every day. They share the flight path, partnered with a company called 911 Security to get the flight path of each drone flight so that people who were concerned about drones over the city could say, was that a police drone? Was that somebody else's? They could go on there and see. So those type of transparency things continued the trust that the community has. And so there wasn't a lot of pushback, and there still isn't. And they're flying today as we speak, responding to radio calls, getting ahead of ground units, and providing intel to officers and firefighters before they even arrive at scene. And so that's kind of the progression that it's taken. And I think even without advanced use cases and beyond visual line of sight, if you just standard traditional drone use, which is, you basically go to the scene, assess the need for an air support, throw up a drone. To do that and not get a lot of pushback from the community and get them to understand the value and that you're going to use it responsibly and transparently, it requires going through a lot of the steps that you've been talking about and that Chula Vista did, and a lot of agencies out there. And so that's what I talk to agencies about on a daily basis. And I think Ben and you and Matt and others have been talking about in terms of what to do before you start training and buying equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, because you're right, we've seen a lot of people kind of go out and get like, oh, cool, like we'll go get the drone and then like figure out how we're going to use it. I think it's important to ask, like, what are our missions, right? Like, where do we envision that? And sure, that changes some, but I think that's probably one of the most important questions to ask first, right? Like, what are we doing with this? Like, where, what problems are we solving, within the community? And then the other thing that I thought that Chula Vista did really well is that community engagement, right? I mean, I remember I went to a few media events, where there was like local, I even think some national media out there, and just telling everybody what's going on and being very transparent. And then if we look at, this is what, I think you mentioned this, Fritz, the website here, the portal.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So this is another piece of it too, of that transparency, is that, Chula Vista has this dedicated drone program page that the community can come and see what's going on with it. And then it's got even this dashboard here, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But Fritz, would you mind just kind of, and before I have you do this, I'll just explain real quick. Fritz mentioned that Chula Vista has the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight right now, or what we call BV loss. And that's sort of been like a holy grail for us in the drone industry, with trying to do more, right? Because when we're limited to line of sight, right, you picture maybe an officer showing up on scene, then determining, okay, I need to use the drone now. And Fritz, you said this a few years ago, and I'll never forget it. What we're doing is we're changing the drone from becoming a reactive tool to a proactive tool, right? So instead of, if you can go beyond visual line of sight, then the officer responding doesn't even have to deal with the drone technology. In fact, the officer responding can have their tablet out and they're actually seeing live what the drone is seeing, because the drone was allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight. And so that's what Fritz was talking about, that authorization that we got from the FAA, which was a fair amount of work. But that's what we're trying to do. We're saying if we can get some of these regulations, push some of this stuff, then we can actually do more with the technology, and we can do more and give our responding officers more data and better data, because that's really what they need showing up on scene, right? Being able to determine, you get a call for a gun, you don't know, right? If we can determine that, ahead of time, with the drone, obviously, that's huge, and really where we see some of the potential and some of this actually in action. So Fritz, if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking everybody through kind of quickly how that ConOps works there with the drone as a first responder, and what that means specifically.
Yeah, well, I'll just describe what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. So they have a pilot that's in a real-time crime center in their police department. He's looking at a big screen TV, can't see the world outside. They have a couple of pilots on 2 different rooftops, each with a 3-mile radius flight range. The 2 rooftops and that 3-mile radius covers about half the city, about 70% of the calls for service. They're working on expanding to 4 sites total, which would basically cover their whole city, 52 square miles. But the person in the real-time crime center is just monitoring incoming radio calls, calls on live 911, monitoring the CAD. And when they see that there's an interesting call or a call with potential where, you know, oversight would, you know, an air support would be of assistance, they basically launch the drone and fly the drone to that location and get overhead. So you got, you know, fighting transients or a fire or a robbery now or domestic violence. And so they're flying 12, 15, 18 missions a day, almost always getting ahead of the ground units because the response time is about a minute or two, depending on how far away from the launch site it is. And then that person who's on the controls is also a police officer, an experienced incident manager. So they're getting on the radio like another resource and telling officers, yeah, this is what I see and this is how you should approach, and this is which direction the fire is burning, and these are the structures that might be in danger, and this is the direction the suspect's leaving, and the description of the car and the license plate. And oftentimes, actually 20% of the time, they'll get overhead and realize that the call is old. It's no longer happening, and they can get on the air or call the reporting party and say, hey, we're overhead in a drone. And they do it all the time. You'll see the person on the camera waving up at the drone and saying, yeah, those people, that fight is left or the problem's resolved. And so then the drone responds back to base and they clear the unit. So then 2 units don't have to respond to that. So it's a great resource to not only address critical incidents and maybe give life-saving information to officers before they get there, but it's also a resource management tool. And the beyond visual line of sight, I mean, without that, you could maybe cover a mile radius, which is about 3 square miles. With beyond visual line of sight, flying up to 3 miles where you can't actually see the drone, but the pilot on the roof can see the airspace and avoid aircraft if necessary. That increases the area of coverage by 10, which, as you can see, makes it much more scalable. You're just going to get a lot more incidents that you're able to respond to and add value. Otherwise, you'd have to have too many people on too many roofs to really provide value to the ground units.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's the whole thing, right? Being able to fly beyond visual line of sight. And so let me share this screen here with you. I'm not sure. Let me try this. So here's the dashboard that we were talking about here. So these numbers to me are absolutely compelling, right? Fritz, like I remember like when this first came up and watching these numbers on a daily basis. It's incredible to me. So they're almost at 3,000 calls responded to. The drone has assisted in some way in 387 arrests. The one, and I don't know, Fritz, I don't know which one of these stats is most compelling to you. The one, and you know, as you know, my background's not law enforcement, but the one that really jumps out at me is almost 700 times the drone deployment avoided dispatching a patrol unit. I mean, to me, that's huge, but I don't know which one of those is kind of the biggest one to you.
I like looking at how many. They're going to go over 3,000 this week. I was just talking with Vern about it, and so I remember when 1,000 was a milestone, so now you got 3,000, and so that's just an enormous amount of missions, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of cool incidents that are happening every day that you know, where it adds value. Everyone asked me, I knew this was coming up, so everyone asked me what kind of things does the drone do? So I pulled up 3 things that happened yesterday with the drone as first responder, if you want to go over those. So yeah. Okay, so this is just yesterday. There was like, I think 15 or 20 flights yesterday. So they had a guy on the phone who wanted to commit suicide. There weren't any units available. It was on a payphone. I'm surprised they find those anymore. And so dispatch was able to watch the video feed because the drone was overhead, and they could see he wasn't going to hurt himself or anyone else in terms of having weapons. And the dispatchers were talking to the guy on the phone saying, yeah, I can see you. And they described him and said, hey, we're going to have help. Please don't do anything. And it became a mental health call. But the ability for dispatch to be able to see the people that they're talking to is huge. The next one was it came out as a disturbance, road rage. The person was in a fight with someone who was following him. She had a young child in the car. The drone got overhead, found the car, followed the car to an area where the officers were nearby. The drones directed the officers into where the cars were stopped, was able to get the license plates of the suspect vehicle, and the officers made contact with them. And then finally, there was an attempt robbery They heard the call on live 911 before units were available. The drone got overhead, and the call came out as a fight in a park with one person being jumped. The drone got overhead, found the suspects who were armed with a gun and brass knuckles, and he followed the suspects as they're leaving the scene. Was overhead before the officers even realized the call was coming, because it wasn't even in CAD yet, and guided the officers into the suspect vehicle to make a stop. And that's arrest that wouldn't have happened without the drone. So you can imagine as a cop getting a radio call of a robbery and then being able to pull out your phone and being able to see immediately the car that is involved and be directed in by an incident manager on, making the stop, and then having overwatch during the stop in case there's rabbits or an incident. And that's in a day. That happens pretty much every day.
That to me, again, it's, the word that I just say over and over again with this is just, that's absolutely compelling. And you think about, the officers and the community and just kind of the safety that data provides. Fascinating stories. I'd heard a few. There's one out there. We'll see maybe if we can find the link for it and send it to everybody. But it's the one with the motorcycle. And
yeah.
The motorcycle chase.
Yeah, that was really the first aha one where, because at first we were operating within a mile, so we were kind of a slave to the limited work within a mile of the station. And everyone was wondering, is this going to be worth the effort? And then that one, which there's a video out there, was a really, where everybody got excited. Hey, this has a lot of potential. I won't go over that story because I think it's well told. I think the one that's most compelling was the one where the guy was out in front playing with a toy gun in front of a taco shop. And it kind of reminded us of the Tamir Rice incident and how you could really change the dynamic of being able to see and hear what's going on before getting there.
Yeah, I remember you actually talking about that before this whole thing got, when you were still in kind of the ConOps part of it, talking about that and having that data, when you're coming up on scene. And I did see that video too, and it's pretty amazing. Can you talk? So I guess one of the things that when we talk about BV loss, that we kind of missed out on is a scene where you have an officer who comes up on a scene and for whatever reason, like maybe the DFR drones are not able, maybe they're not working, but that officer maybe has a drone that they can use. Can you talk a little bit about the close proximity, low altitude stuff that you've been working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most people who have a drone program understand this challenge. It exists for everybody flying a drone. Is how would you keep the drone, your eyes on the drone the whole time when it flies behind a house or behind trees, and it's not so far away you can't see it like a DFR operation, but it is not in your view the whole time. And everybody's kind of been struggling of putting the drone where you need it to be, but also complying with that FAA regulation. And one of the concerns was, how do you mitigate ground risk? How do you make sure you don't hit things? And when I came with Skydio and saw its ability to see the world around it, it kind of sparked an idea that, perhaps this drone is enough of a mitigation to be able to get a waiver that says, if you promise not to fly so high you're in national airspace and get hit by manned aircraft, so you promise to stay low to the ground below the infrastructure and use infrastructure masking, and then you have some ground-based risk mitigation like obstacle avoidance, would the FAA allow you to fly beyond visual line of sight then? And then, of course, I reached out to Charles Werner Drone Responders, and he pointed me to Chris Sadler over at York, who had done a lot of work on a waiver just like that, requiring some effort, right, and some time to set up. And so I wanted a solution that could be deployed and used in the first minutes of an incident or emergency. And so started working on that at Skydio, got their team involved, got Chula Vista involved. Brennan Groves came on board, who'd done some work in this area. So it was really a team effort. And then Chula Vista we wrote the waiver, and Chula Vista submitted it and just recently received approval to fly beyond visual line of sight under the parameters, as long as they didn't go higher than 50 feet above the highest infrastructure around them and no further than 1,500 feet from the pilot, they could fly beyond visual line of sight. The FAA calls that tactical beyond visual line of sight. Internally, we've been calling it close proximity, low altitude, because that's the type of flight that we wanted to do. And so I think it's resonating. I'm hearing a lot from agencies who want to get waivers, similar waivers. We'd love to see the FAA make that easier and easier for agencies. And I think it is a solution that's going to open up a lot of doors and really increase the value of drones on these tactical operations.
Yeah, that's so. Have you deployed that yet, or has Chula Vista deployed that yet, or do you know, or can talk about that?
Chula Vista has the waiver, and
Okay.
so they have the ability to fly beyond visual line of sight under those parameters. So they have the TBVLOS, as the FAA calls it, CPLA, as well as the DFR related beyond visual line of sight. So they actually have two different beyond visual line of sight waivers, and both are very unique. In fact, the CPLA, as it's written, as Chula Vista is operating on it, is, I believe, speaking with Brendan Groves, it's the first beyond the visual line of sight waiver that doesn't require the use of a VO or some other type of ground-based surveillance system to mitigate the risk. So it really is groundbreaking. I think it's going to open up a lot of potential going forward. Drones, I think, are becoming easier to fly. I mean, Skydio with their autonomy engine is really trying to take the worry out of it and make it much more scalable for many more police and fire departments, public safety, where anybody needs to fly a drone. And so it's just another step forward from, the years ago that you and I were talking about this DFR one. It's crazy. It's great to see.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely incredible to see where it's at now, and definitely thank you for all of your work along those lines, because it makes it easier, I think, for the rest of us. One of the things that comes up, and one of the questions I get a lot with this kind of stuff too, is flight over people, and are you allowed to do that, and do you have any mitigations for that? I know on the Part 107 side, you pretty much need a parachute. It's a little bit different, I think, on the COA side, but what do you think about that as far as flight over people and how that works?
Well, to be honest, it's pretty unclear, actually.
Yeah.
It's not very well defined. It's kind of like, it when you see it. There are a lot of agencies that are flying under 107 only, and then flying in an air over areas that you might think have people, but they're doing it in a way that they're staying over buildings.
Right, like off to the side. Yeah.
Off to the side. They're doing things to be able to have ground awareness. And so there is a way to be operational 107 and still fly over the community. Having said that, I think that one of the advantages of having a COA, and most agencies probably should operate under both the COA and 107, but having the COA allows you to be able to fly over people in cases of emergency. And, in police work and fire, a lot of what we're doing, what they're doing is emergency related. So you have that ability to fly over people, still obviously taking care not to fly over static crowds or large groups of people. But Chula Vista obviously is out flying over the community every day. And they're doing that because they have a COA, and the FAA understands that the increased ground risk, the assumption of liability is on the city. That's one of the reasons that they allow you to self-certify your pilots, self-certify your aircraft as a public aircraft operator. So it's a little bit of a nuance, and there is no, you talk to 3 or 4 different FAA guys, reps, and you might get slightly different answers, but I think as long as you take care and do what you can to mitigate the risks to people on the ground, you're going to be able to do the missions you want to do, at least from a public safety standpoint.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for kind of that explanation from somebody who's been through that process and has dealt with flying over people every day. And the thing, because you're right, you're not going to find that anywhere written down, right? We get this question a lot from especially public safety agencies that are trying to really kind of follow the letter of the law. But you're right, it's not totally clear about that flight over people. And I'm with you, I've talked to 4 different FAA people, and I've kind of gotten 4 different answers as far as, you know, kind of what that means. I've heard people use the term incidental flight over people, and you're right. I think it's that simple. As long as you're not loitering over people, you know, the drone is transiting somewhere. I even think they told us that in those IPP meetings that would be acceptable to them, although it's difficult to find that in writing anywhere. So, but I did want to touch on that just for a minute. So thank you for that. So I think we're about 45 minutes here. Shauna, do we have any questions? Or I mean, I guess I'll just take a minute here and kind of open it up and see if there's anything anyone else wanted to talk about or us to kind of come back to.
Sure. Just so everyone knows, I put the link to the Vista site that been put up there in the chat box, and I just put his information up there, his contact information up there as well. So I have a question, but I'll see if there's anyone else on the line that wants to chime in by unmuting themselves or in the chat box. Okay. So a question for either, and I guess it's kind of a two-part. So maybe the first to Fritz is, you know, you mentioned the ideal process would be to get the team in place first and then look at the appropriate system. How did you roll that out at Chula Vista? Did you have community meetings kind of towards the beginning and just say, look, here, even as you're looking into that type of UAS system and program, and kind of get their input? And then the other part to Ben is, have you talked to agencies who maybe have even invited you to come participate if they're going to use your services or your product, and just kind of so that the public has an absolute understanding of what the device can do, what its privacy protections are, all those types of things. What kind of community engagement aspects at the beginning of this rollout have you witnessed?
So at Chula Vista, they had meetings. Like I said, they got stakeholders within the departments, the city attorney, and some leaders within the community, had some meetings, established a policy. Once they had a policy, they presented to city council, and there was an opportunity for public to come in and make comments then. And that was enough to start the program and buy the first few platforms. And they started small. They bought a couple. They just did it on limited use cases for, you know, short search and rescue or some major operations where they want Overwatch. And then once DFR started rolling, then we had more meetings. We presented in front of council again, and we actually had a specific community meeting set up, inviting people to specifically talk about drone as first responder and the use of drones in the community. And then obviously we did a lot of social media and talking to local media, made sure that it'd be hard to live in Chula Vista and not be aware that they had a drone program going on.
Yeah, I kind of second that. What I would say on that is, like, so I've been to, you know, I think we've worked with agencies in 30 some states and done training in 20 some states. And where I've seen agencies be successful is having that community engagement piece. And really the successful ones are like what Chula Vista did. One of the first trainings that I ever did actually was with an agency in Indiana. And I showed up and they were like, hey, the media is going to be here for the entire training day. And I was like, awesome, great. And it's same kind of thing. And in that community, everyone knows there's a drone program there, and everyone knows what it's for, and the success that they've had with it. So that kind of continued transparency and continued engagement, I think, is important too.
So there was a question in the chat box. What is CVPD using to live stream their drone footage to dispatch officers, the command post?
Yeah, so we started a partnership for the IPP with Capt, which has since been acquired by Motorola and Motorola Aerial. So they renamed it, but essentially what it is, it's a teleoperation. So it's more than streaming. The teleoperation allows you to fly the drone remotely. So although you have a pilot in command on the roof that has a remote control in their hand, they're flying it through this Motorola Aerial software, which allows someone else anywhere in the world on a computer to be able to fly the drone remotely. And that Motorola Aerial is then streamed out to their Spectator app, so anyone with that app can log in and see exactly what the DFR pilot in the real-time crime center can see, as well as pull it up on a computer. The dispatchers will have it up on their computers, so they'll have a little box in the corner that shows the live drone feed at all times.
And one of the things, just to add to that, one of the things that was a part of you know, this getting approved through the FAA was the ability to geofence with that software, right? And be able to kind of map out, like, regardless of what the operator inputs, the drone can't go beyond this point. It can't go higher than this altitude or past this building or beyond the boundaries of whatever can be set. And that can be done like really simply with the software.
Right. And that was important. That mitigation was important because technically speaking, the person on the roof has ultimate control. They're the pilot in command. They can, as soon as they touch the joysticks, the person downstairs is kicked off. That satisfies the need, but the FAA requirement that the pilot in command be in full control of the drone at all times. And so essentially just allowing the person downstairs permission through electronic approval to fly the drone as long as they obey the predetermined parameters set up by the geofence and also the pilot in command's overall sense of airspace.
Any final questions for either gentleman? Well, hearing none, Ben and Fritz, thank you guys for your time and for the insights. And again, all the links and information was provided in the chat box. But if you have any other questions or need to get a hold of either gentleman, we at CPOA can certainly help you do that. So we appreciate your time and the information that you shared. And thanks everyone for joining. And have a great rest of the day and great weekend coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Ben.